What's good, y'all? And welcome back to another preseason preview video. In today's video, we're going over the Phoenix Suns. In case this is your first preseason preview video of mine you're seeing, basically what I do is go over the offseason, give a little recap there, and then try to look into the future and see what we can expect in this upcoming season. I'm making videos on all 30 NBA teams, so make sure you check out the channels for the ones I already uploaded, and then make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the ones coming out going forward. But let's just jump right into it and start talking about the Phoenix Suns. Last year was a pretty big disappointment for them. They ended up as the 11th seed, going 36-46. I don't want to pile too much on Bradley Beal, but if we're being honest, ever since he came to the Phoenix Suns, they have been a disappointing team. Last year, like I said, being the 11th seed, missing out completely on the postseason. Very disappointing when you have the amount of talent that they had, especially as their stars. And then even the year before that, they made it to the playoffs and they got swept in 4 in the first round against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And not only just the on-court disappointment, but last year there was a lot of drama off the court surrounding the Suns, whether it was the Bradley Beal no trade clause situation where he was denying trades from the Suns. You know, the Suns were like, yo, we want to move you over here. He's like, nah, I'd rather stay right here. That was a lot of talking points. And then also Kevin Durant, he was unaware that the Suns were hearing offers for him, so that kind of ticked him off. Obviously, we know the domino effect that set off. But just a lot of talk around the Phoenix Suns and not a lot of winning. The good part about it, though, is the Suns realized all of this stuff, realized this disappointment, and said, you know what, things need to change, and they made those changes. So let's just move right into the offseason that the Suns had, because they were very, very busy, to say the least. Before we talk about the guys that are actually coming to Phoenix, I do want to highlight the notable guys that they lost. Starting off with the most notable player that moved teams in probably the entire NBA this offseason. That is, of course, Kevin Durant. He was traded to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, the 10th overall pick in this year's draft, and a few second-round picks. We'll talk about the additions and what they got back in a little bit, but just to highlight the Kevin Durant stuff, I mentioned in the intro of the video, he was kind of caught off guard at the fact that at the trade deadline, the Suns were not even looking to move him, but they were at least just receiving offers, hearing them, listening to what teams were offering for Kevin Durant. And I don't think Kevin really liked that, especially the fact that he was caught off guard and he wasn't told about it. And I know Kevin Durant is a pretty polarizing player, and even this situation itself is pretty polarizing. There's some people that look at it from the perspective of, hey, the NBA is a business. Teams have a right to listen to offers and to trade you if they feel like they want to do that. So, they didn't do anything wrong, which objectively is right. But then there's the other perspective of it where it's like, yo, Kevin Durant is a Hall of Famer. He requested to come to Phoenix. He put on a lot for Phoenix. He deserves at least a heads up saying, hey, Kevin, we're going to listen to offers. And I definitely get that perspective of it too. Regardless, though, it doesn't matter what I think about it. It doesn't matter what you think about it. Kevin Durant was disrespected by it, so he's like, you know what? If you guys want to listen to offers, definitely move me. And that's where we got into this situation where they were kind of forced to move him. And honestly, for the fact that everyone knew Kevin Durant was getting moved, they didn't really have a lot of leverage. I do think what they got back was pretty decent. And we'll talk about the guys that they got back in this trade in a little bit, but just objectively, when your team loses out on someone as good as Kevin Durant, you're going to be losing some talent, for sure. Another guy they lost this offseason was Bradley Beal. They bought him out of the rest of his contract, and he became a free agent and signed a new contract with the Los Angeles Clippers. This is another thing like the Kevin Durant situation where it was kind of written on the wall. Everyone around the league knew it was probably going to happen, knew that it needed to happen. The Bradley Beal situation, the fit was not there. Him next to D-Book and Kevin Durant, it didn't work. And then obviously on top of that, the decline of the no trade clause and all of that situation, I assume there was probably some type of animosity in the locker room against him. And for what it's worth, I do want to say Bradley Beal, I think, is still a good basketball player. Is he good enough to make $50 million a year? No, definitely not. So I definitely understand why the Phoenix Suns wanted to move off of him, and then including all of the other, talk around him. This is another move that just 100% made sense, and I think the Suns needed to do it. The Suns also lost a few guys in free agency. The first guy I want to highlight is Tyus Jones. He signed a new contract with the Orlando Magic. Tyus Jones was pretty good for the Suns last year. I think when you have so many score-first guys like D-Book, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal. It's important to have a playmaking first type of guy at a point guard position, and that is what Tyus Jones is. He's just really steady at the point guard position. He can knock down three-point shots, he can pass the ball, and he won't turn over the ball, and those three things are really important to have at your point guard position. I definitely think that he will be missed to an extent here in Phoenix, but, you know, then again, it makes sense that he moved on because he only signed to Phoenix for a minimum. He wanted to play up his value, and then the super disappointing season they had didn't really play up his value too much. And then the last guy of note that they lost in free agency was Mason Plumlee. He signed a new deal to return back to the Charlotte Hornets. We'll talk about the guys that they brought in this offseason, but let's just say they have the center position pretty covered. I don't think they'll be missing Mason Plumlee too much. Now it's time to talk about who's coming to Phoenix this season, and of course I do want to start by talking about the guys they got back in the Kevin Durant trade. Like I mentioned, they traded Kevin Durant to the Rockets, and they got back Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and a 10th overall pick who turned into Kaban Maliwatch. I'll start by talking about Jalen Green because he is definitely the young player, the star in the trade, the guy with the most notability, if that makes sense. I do think that just objectively the fit here in Phoenix for Jalen Green next to Devin Booker is just weird. I know there's already been reports saying that the Suns want to run Jalen Green at point guard. Devin Booker is going to be going back to his normal position of shooting guard, and that's going to be their backcourt. And that just doesn't seem right to me. I will say I'm very happy that Devin Booker is back at his normal shooting guard position. I do think he is a solid playmaker, a good playmaker, but definitely he's at his best when he could just lock in, get in his scoring bag, and just, you know, light up the other team, not have to worry about getting this guy involved, getting that guy involved. So I like that aspect of it. But more specifically on the fact that Jalen Green is going to be the point guard, I don't like that. Because essentially Jalen Green is a little bit more of a raw Devin Booker in some ways. Obviously they have their differences for sure, but Jalen Green is looking to get his shot off. He's looking to get to the basket and dunk on someone. He's looking to get to his step back three or whatever it is. He's looking for his shot. Jalen Green has just never been a pass-first guy. He has never been a guy that I've looked at as being a good playmaker or a positive playmaker. When you look at his numbers, his best playmaking year, he averaged about 3.5 assists and 2.5 turnovers. That's not very good for a guy that handles the ball a bunch. And that's not to say that Jalen Green is a bad player at all. I do think that last year he looked pretty good in certain stretches. Since coming into the league, his biggest issue has been consistency. And, you know, he'll have some stretches for like 10 games where he'll be averaging damn near 40, looking amazing, hitting like, you know, 6 threes a game. And then he'll have other stretches where he won't hit a 3 for 5 games in a row and, you know, will have really poor efficiencies. And, you know, his main issue will be the consistency. And the fact that he's coming to a new area and switching positions, that doesn't really bode well in my eyes for him to have a super consistent year. All that being said, though, I do think that Jalen Green is a talented player. He's only 23 years old still, even though he's been in the league for like 3 or 4 years at this point. He is super athletic, and like I mentioned, when he is on, he is one of the best scorers in the league. It's just about staying on and being on for the, you know, extent of an 82-game season. The other player they got back in that trade, of course, was Dillon Brooks too. Obviously, Dillon Brooks is a much older player than Jalen Green. He's not looked at to be one of their core guys going forward, I don't think. But I do think that he could still help the Phoenix Suns in the locker room as a leadership and culture guy. We saw in Memphis when he was there, he was one of their biggest culture pieces, one of their like vocal leaders in the locker room without even being anywhere near the best player. And I do think that that is super important to integrate into a locker room, especially one that is looking to build that culture. Even when he went to Houston, we saw him kind of rub off on some of those young guys and turn them into a super rugged defensive team that they are now. Obviously, Ime Udoka and all of their other players have a lot to do with that as well. But I do think Dillon Brooks was a big part of that, and hopefully he can bring that to Phoenix. And then also when he is on the court actually playing, he has quietly turned into one of the better 3-and-D wings in the NBA. The defense has always been there, super scrappy guy, never backed down from anyone. But last year he shot almost 40% from 3 on pretty high volume. I don't know if that's going to stick or if he'll go back to his like mid to low 30s where he normally shoots. Regardless, though, if he can keep that three-point shooting while still bringing the defense and being that locker room presence, I definitely think he'll be a good addition. And then the last guy that's a part of the Kevin Durant trade is Kaman Maliwatch, who they drafted with the 10th overall pick. And Maliwatch is a pretty interesting player. He only started playing basketball in 2019 when he turned 13 years old, which is insane to really say out loud. Obviously he has progressed very fast considering he was a freshman at Duke and now just got drafted 10th overall in the NBA lottery. Really insane just to think about, but I do want to say, to preface that is why he still is such a raw player. He's still really impactful, but also very raw at the same time. His impact comes from the fact that he is 7'2" with a 7'5" wingspan and a standing reach of almost 10 feet. He can almost stand and touch the rim. He is an absolute massive human being, and he uses that massive body to really be a great rim deterrer and shot blocker. He's really good at positioning and knowing where to put himself to really mess up the flow of the offense or mess up a shot attempt, make them pass out from the paint touch. He's also a very good rebounder. Again, given his size, it makes sense. He's pretty athletic too, where he's able to be a good lob catcher, finisher at the rim, all of those things. But where he does kind of struggle is when he gets switched out to the perimeter. Being 7'2" and such a big guy, his foot speed is a little bit on the slower side, so he can tend to get exposed a little bit on the perimeter. And then also his conditioning at times seems to be a little bit lackluster. There's times where he's just, since he's so big and so active and giving a lot of effort a lot of the times, he gets gassed pretty quickly. I do think that is something that could definitely be fixed pretty quickly, though, with the strength and conditioning of the NBA. The Kevin Durant trade wasn't the only trade the Suns did this offseason, though. They also traded for Mark Williams. In exchange, they gave up the 29th overall pick in this year's draft, which turned into Liam McNeely, and then a 2029 first-round pick. And they, of course, got back Mark Williams and then also a 2029 second-round pick. I gotta be honest, I love the fact that the Suns saw last year that they didn't like what their center rotation was, and this offseason, they doubled and almost tripled down on the fact that, we want centers that play the way we want them to play. No disrespect to Mason Plumlee, to Yusuf Nurkic, any of those guys, yeah. I've always said, though, that the Phoenix Suns, albeit if they changed their roster a lot at this point, but still, the Phoenix Suns, their center needs to be defensive-oriented, a rebounder, and a rim runner. Those three things would just fit what they needed perfectly. And now, with Kaman Maliwatch and then Mark Williams, that is definitely covered. Those guys do those three things. And obviously, the biggest thing with Mark Williams has been his health. Since coming into the NBA, he really hasn't been able to stay healthy. Obviously that's why the Lakers, they traded for him and then rescinded that trade and said, you know what, we don't want to deal with his health issues or whatever it is. Hopefully, for Mark Williams' sake, it's nothing too serious and he's able to have a healthy rest of the NBA career. I guess that's kind of the risk that you're taking with Mark Williams. Regardless, though, when he is on the court, he does a lot of the same things like I was talking about with Kaman Maliwatch. He's 7 foot, so he's super big. He's got great long arms, a lob threat, can rebound the ball, shot blocker, but he is a little bit more athletic and can move his body a little bit better than a guy like Maliwatch. And I definitely think that, again, if he stays healthy, he is basically the perfect center to have here in Phoenix. And then, although this guy isn't technically a new addition, he was a free agent. Colin Gillespie, the Suns re-signed him to a 1-year veteran minimum contract. And now that we recap the offseason for the Phoenix Suns, let's take a look at a potential rotation we could be seeing this year. In the starting lineup, we have Jalen Green, Devin Booker, Dillon Brooks, Ryan Dunn, and Mark Williams. And then off the bench, we have Colin Gillespie, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, Oso Ighodaro, and Kaman Maliwatch. I definitely think that the Suns were kind of put between a rock and a hard place this offseason. Like I mentioned, they came off of 2 years of pretty big disappointment. They're pretty limited with their money and their assets, so there's not much they can really do to try to fix the roster. But also, they didn't really have much leverage with the moves that they did end up making. So again, rocking a hard place. They chose the hard place. They got rid of Bradley Beal for nothing. They just bought him out of his contract. They traded away Kevin Durant. Again, they didn't really have much leverage to really, squeeze out all of the value they could. Again, I do think the package of Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and Kaman Maliwatch is solid. Good return. But again, just objectively, talent-wise, they lost talent this offseason, which, again, is rough to go into an offseason knowing that that's what's happening. And then right now, honestly, I think they are kind of still in the crossroads of deciding on if they want to do a rebuild or a retool. Obviously, they still have Devin Booker, who just signed a super big extension. He seems like he definitely wants to be a one-team guy in Phoenix, so that's great. You really don't have to worry about that too much. But still, in the back of your mind, you got to think, all right, D-Book's probably around, 27, 28 at this point. He's going to want to go back to a competing team. You know, it wasn't too long ago. He was just in the finals competing for a championship. I assume he does not want to just rot away here in Phoenix. And the Suns do still have some veterans that are good role players, like a Dillon Brooks who just came in, like a Royce O'Neal, who I think is one of the most underrated role players in the league. Grayson Allen is still here. You know, they have guys that could really be good role players on a competing team, but also at the same time, they have some of their younger guys like a Jalen Green who just came in, Kaman Maliwadz, Mark Williams, Ryan Dunn, Oso Ighodaro. All of these guys are a little bit younger. Do they want to try to accelerate the pace, see what they got, maybe make some trades and try to get back to competing? Or should they sell off some of those role players like a Royce O'Neal, like a Grayson Allen, like a Dillon Brooks, and just completely, not bottom out because they'll still have Devin Booker and some of these other guys, but get just even younger? I don't know. I think, again, they still are kind of at that crossroads where they can decide which way they want to go. If I'm being honest, though, if I was in charge, I probably would tear it down just a little bit more, try to see what value I can get out of these older role players, just because when I look at this team right here, I don't think that they're anywhere near able to be competitive in this Western Conference. You know, one of the biggest glaring issues on this roster in my eyes is their self-creation. Obviously, they have Devin Booker, they have Jalen Green. That's it. Like, literally, that's it. Shout out Colin Gillespie. He's a solid playmaker and can really, you know, run the point guard at the backup. But if he is one of your better playmakers on your roster's not looking that good. A lot of those role players that I mentioned are play finishers and are best coming off a cut or catching and shooting, like a Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, Dillon Brooks. None of these guys are really going to create their shot too much. You know, Dillon Brooks will get to his mid-range game a little bit if he really wants. But, you know, I do think that that is going to be a serious issue. And then even on top of that, to kind of compound it, when you have a team that doesn't have a lot of self-creation, and then also doesn't have a lot of playmaking, like, I really think the offense could be super sluggish. I mentioned at the beginning that the Suns are looking for Jalen Green to be their point guard and to be the guy that kind of sets up a lot of these other guys. I do think he's going to struggle with that, which in turn could make these guys, the rest of them, struggle, which in turn makes the offense as a whole struggle. I think defensively, they could be solid. They have good rim protectors. They have defensive-oriented guys like Dillon Brooks and Ryan Dunn, Royce O'Neal. You know, I do wonder who's really going to be the guy to guard, like, the perimeter guards. Like, are they just going to stick Dillon Brooks on the best guy no matter what position he plays? Or, like, is D-Book going to get into his defensive bag a little bit more? That's a little bit of a concern for me, but I do think that their defense should be at least a little bit better than their offense. Before we move on, I do want to mention some notable reserves for the Phoenix Suns. Starting off with Nick Richards. He came into a trade halfway through the season last year and was their starter for 90% of their games ever since coming over there. I do think that he is a solid center, and there is a chance that he is their backup instead of Kaman Maliwadz, just because, like I mentioned, Maliwadz is pretty raw right now. Or in a situation where Mark Williams is still struggling with injury, has to miss a game here or there, Nick Richards is definitely a high-quality third-string center to have. Also, shout out to Jordan Goodwin. He was a pretty good pickup for the Suns. The Lakers waived him in order to pick up Marcus Smart, and then the Suns picked him up off waivers. I do think that there's a potential him and Colin Gillespie could kind of battle it out for that backup point guard position. I just like a little bit more what Colin Gillespie brings offensively as a shooter, as a playmaker. Last year, Jordan Goodwin had a good three-point shooting season, but for the course of his career, he really hasn't been able to be a consistent three-point shooter. I do like what he brings defensively, and if he's able to keep that three-point shot up, I think he could definitely be the backup point guard. But all around, I'd rather take the offense of Colin Gillespie. And then last but not least, they also drafted Rasheer Flemings with the 31st overall pick. So first guy that fell out of the first round. I do think that he has some potential to play especially depending on how the season's going as the year gets later. If they're not really anywhere near winning, I definitely think that Rasheer Flemings could come in and get some minutes. He is super interesting as a defensive prospect, just how athletic he is while also having good size, being like 6'9". I do think he is a pretty modern power forward here, especially last year. He was incredible shooting the three ball. If he's able to keep that production from the three while also being the great defender he shows flashes of being, he definitely could get some minutes. And now it is time to talk about the ceiling, floor, and my expectations for the Phoenix Suns. Starting off with their ceiling, I could see them being as high as the 10th seed and in the play-in tournament. Now, if the Suns are a 10th seed and make it back to the postseason, I think that that would be an incredibly good year for them. Like I mentioned, last year they were only the 11th seed and arguably had way more talent on the roster. So if they are able to actually make the postseason in this super deep Western Conference while making a rebuilding / retooling move, I definitely think that would be a huge win for the Suns. Now again, I don't know how likely that would be. I am talking about their ceiling in my eyes being just the 10th seed, which is the absolute lowest you could be while being a postseason team. I do think in a situation like this, we'll just see an incredible season from D-Book, obviously, and then also Jalen Green. He's had some quotes where he definitely seems a little spited, a little bit like he has a chip on his shoulder, so maybe that'll motivate him to have one of his better seasons of his career, and in that case, I could see them sneaking into the play-in tournament. Once they make it, I mean, it would be incredibly difficult to win 2 play-in tournament games against any of the Western Conference teams that would be in the play-in tournament, so I do think that at their ceiling, they will be play-in losers. At their floor, I can see them being as low as the 14th seed, and in the lottery, like I mentioned, the Utah Jazz, no disrespect to you guys, super low down there on the Western Conference in your own tier by yourself at that 15th seed. So, you know, I do think that the Suns could be pretty bad, though, still in this situation. But when you talk about my expectations for them, I expect them to be a little bit higher than that, around the 12th seed, and, of course, in the lottery. I just feel like they're a team that last year missed the postseason and now lost talent. And then, especially when you look at a lot of the teams in the Western Conference, they gained talent. Even some teams that finished below them, like the Spurs, for example, they gained talent this offseason. I definitely think that they could leapfrog them and then drop them a little bit in the standings. That's all it really takes for them to end up as the 12th seed. So I do think it could be really easy for the Suns to kind of slide in this year's standings. What do you guys think, though? Let me know in the comments below where you think the Phoenix Suns will finish in this year's standings. Will they make the postseason? How far will they make it? Let me know what you guys think. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In the description, there's links to all my social medias, so make sure you follow me on all those to keep up to date with me. Catch y'all.